Hi class, today you're doing Module 4, Lesson 1. So we just finished Module 3, and one of the last few lessons that we talked about and practiced is doing 1 more, 10 more, 100 more, 1 less, 10 less, and 100 less. So in this first lesson on Module 4, in Lesson 1, you're going to apply your knowledge of what we just learned about. So now we're actually going to use the words more to help us add, and then less to help us subtract. Because when you're adding more, you're adding. And when you're taking away, the number gets lower, or you have less and you're subtracting. So you kind of have to apply that knowledge. Okay? So now you're going to first practice by using patterns and looking for patterns that are 1 more, 10 more, 100 more, or patterns that have 1 less, 10 less, and 100 less. So right here I have an example. You're going to have to look for numbers that are kind of like listed, and you have to look for the pattern, how they're changing. So the way you look is you look how the numbers are changing, and you want to try to look in the hundreds if it is a 3-digit number. Then you can check the tens and see how they're changing, and then the ones. So hundreds, tens, and ones. That's how we look to see how the numbers are changing. If the hundreds are changing, that means it's 100 more or 100 less. Tens are changing, it'll be 10 more or tens less. If the ones are changing, it'll be 1 more, 1 less. If that makes sense. And then if they're going higher, that means it's more. If the numbers are getting lower or less, that means it's subtracting, so it's less. So let's look at these numbers right here. I have a few examples. 32, 33, 34. So we don't have any hundreds, so we don't have to check the hundreds. Let's check the tens. 3, 3, 3. It stayed the same. Now you can look at the ones. 2, 3, 4. Looks like they're going up more, and it's just 1 more since it's in the ones place. Does that make sense? So it's 35, 36, 37. Okay, so this pattern was 1 more. Okay, now let's check this next one. 25, 35, 45. There aren't any hundreds because it is not a 3-digit number. It's a 2-digit number. And let's check the tens now. 2, 3, 4. So it looks like the tens are changing. Let's just look at the ones just in case. 5, 5, 5. So the ones are not changing. The tens are changing. And it looks like the tens are going up. So it's more. So it'd be 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, and 75. So this pattern was 10 more. Let's look at this last example. 79, 69, 59. Once again, there are no hundreds, but let's look at the tens. 7, 6, 5. So this time the numbers are actually going down. So that means, and it's the tens place, so that means it's 10 less. 7, 6, 5, then it'd be 49. The ones stay the same. 39 and 29. So this pattern was 10 less because the digit in that tens place is getting lower. Okay, so now here's the important part. This is a strategy that you're going to use to help you add and subtract. It is called the arrow way. When you're using the arrow way, you have a number that you're starting with, and then an arrow, and on top of the arrow, it tells you how many more you're either adding or taking away. So let's look at this first example. I have 23, and I'm going to do plus 1. Instead of writing an equation, 23 plus 1 equals blank, you're going to use the arrow way, because so there's the equation. You couldn't see it. So this is just a quicker, maybe more efficient way to show how a number is changing. It's called the arrow way because it has an arrow. So you would write the number 23 plus 1, the next number right here after the arrow. So 23 plus 1 is 24. Okay, let's go over here. 35, and on top of the arrow, it's plus 10. So you're doing 35 plus 10. The next number, 35 plus 10, is 45. That'd be 10 more. And it's 10 more. The tens, you're putting another group of 10 in the tens place, so that would make it 45. And if you don't know that, you can just use your fingers. 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. So the answer is 45. Now you're doing this next one, 86 minus 1. So you're doing 1 less. So look at the ones place. It's going to change 1 less. So 86 minus 1 becomes 85. Okay? One more example, 73 minus 10. The tens place needs to get lower, so 7 becomes 6, and the 1 stays the same. 76 minus 10 is 63. So that's just kind of like a more efficient way instead of writing an equation like over here. It's just an efficient way to show an addition or subtraction problem. Okay? And we're going to be using the arrow way a lot. So today is the first day you get to practice that. Now, you're also going to have to use an arrow way. These are called sequences. A sequence is when there's lots of equations or arrows and kind of like a list. So as you can see, there's lots of arrows right here. Okay, let's look at this first sequence. Okay, as you can see, there's blank spots. That's where you're going to write the answer. Okay, and then you take this number and then you look at this arrow and then whatever the answer is you write right there. Okay, so let's practice. So it's 23 plus 1. That would be 24, just like that number up there. So you write 24 right here. And then you take 24 and you do this arrow, plus 10. So 24 plus 10 is 34. And remember, if you didn't know that, use your fingers. Okay, count on your fingers. Then you take this number, 34 plus 1, one more. 34 plus 1 more is 35. Okay, so you don't come back to this number every time for the arrow, the sequence. You take the number that's right before the arrow and then you write the answer after the arrow. And then you take that number and then you go to the next one and you look at that arrow. Okay, let's practice again. Let's do subtraction this time. So 74 minus 1, 1 less than 74 is 73. 73 minus 10, 10 less than 73 is 63. And then 63 minus 1 is 62. Okay, so remember, you just got to look at the number right before the arrow and then look on top of the arrow to see what you're adding or subtracting. Okay, and then you write the answer after the arrow. So those are the sequences, okay? Now let me show you a different type of sequence. Oh, more practice. So 55. So you may have a sequence like this where you have the numbers on both sides and then you have to fill in how the numbers changed on top right there of the arrow. So look at 55 and 65. How are they changing? Are the 10s changing or the 1s changing? So the 10s are changing because 5 becomes 6 and the 1s are the same. It's 5 and 5. So on top of that arrow, you're going to write, and the number gets higher because 5 gets 1 more is 6. So that'd be plus 10. So you may have to fill in how it's changing by more or less up here. Okay, so you have to pay attention to how the number's changing and you write either plus or minus. Up here, 65 plus 1. So we can do that, 66. And then 66 plus 100 would be 166. Okay, let's try it again. So here I see that we need to fill this in right here, the number on the top of the arrow. So let's start from here. And when you have a sequence, I didn't mention this yet, you always go from left to right, just like everything else. So when it's a sequence, you always go left to right. You don't come all the way at the end and start filling the number and then you go backwards because then it would be wrong. So you always go from left to right. So 23 plus 10, 10 more than 23 is 33. Now, when you're looking for that number on top, you want to look at these two numbers, how they're changing, and then you can fill in that top part on top of the arrow. So 33 to 34 is plus 1. 34, and then now you can do this number. You can figure that out. 34 minus 1, that'd be 33. That was a trick. You went backwards. Okay, so now remember, when you're doing the arrow way and you're trying to figure out a sequence and you're trying to figure out that number on top of the arrow, check to see if the hundreds, tens, or ones changed, and if the numbers get higher, you add, because you're adding more. If the numbers get lower, you subtract because the number will be less. Okay? So let's look at that problem set. What you're going to do today. So lesson 1 problem set. Let's look at the direction. It says, complete each more or less statement. This you know how to do. This is a review. Okay? So you got to look at the number and then look at the digit. Number 2. Circle the rule for each pattern. So same thing. Remember I said it would be a pattern. Look at to see if it's the hundreds, tens, or ones changing and if they're going up or down. So if it's the ones place that are changing, it would be 1 more or 1 less. If the tens are changing, it'd be 10 more or 10 less. Same with B. Okay, so you have to circle which one it is. Complete each pattern. Number 3. So same thing. You have to complete the pattern now. So you got to see how it's changing, okay? If it's the hundreds, and if it's getting higher, it'd be more. If it's lower, it's getting less. If it's the tens place, higher would be more, lower would be less. And then if it's the ones place, if the number's getting higher, it'd be 1 more. If it's getting less, it'd be 1 less. So you got to pay attention to that, okay? Good at that. This is where you're practicing the arrow way. So number 4, it says, complete each statement to show mental math using the arrow way. Mental math is you're able to do it in your mind without like counting on your fingers. But if you need your fingers, that's totally fine. Okay? So remember, you got to start with this number. You look at what's on top of the arrow, and then you write the answer over here. Here are some sequences. Okay? So remember, you want to go from left to right when you're trying to answer that sequence. Okay? Same with number 5. Here's a longer sequence. Okay, so you just go from left to right and you fill in the answers by the arrow. Okay? And then number 6, these are word problems. It's saying solve each word problem using the arrow way to record your mental math. So instead of writing an equation, you can use the arrow way today to solve that problem. Okay, get started.